On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, bound for Beijing. It was a routine overnight flight. 2 experienced pilots. 239 people on board. Clear weather. No distress signals. Nothing about that night suggested history was about to change. Less than an hour after takeoff, the aircraft vanished. Not crashed. Not reported missing immediately. It simply disappeared from civilian radar. The last confirmed radio transmission came at 1:19 a.m. The words were calm, almost casual. "Good night, Malaysian 370. After that, silence. At first, air traffic controllers assumed a communication glitch. Planes lose contact all the time. But minutes passed. Then more minutes. And the radar screen stayed empty. What investigators would later discover was far more disturbing. Military radar data showed the aircraft didn't continue toward Beijing. Instead, it turned sharply west, crossing the Malaysian peninsula, flying back over land, and heading into the open Indian Ocean. No emergency call. No explanation. No passengers aware of what was happening. For hours, the plane kept flying. Somewhere in the darkness, Flight 370 became a ghost aircraft, invisible to the world, yet still airborne. Families waited at airports, staring at arrival boards that never changed. Governments scrambled for answers they didn't have. And within days, the disappearance of MH370 would become one of the greatest aviation mysteries in modern history. But this was only the beginning. Because the more data investigators uncovered, the stranger the story became. As search operations began, investigators focused on one critical question. How could a modern commercial aircraft simply vanish? The first major clue came from military radar. While civilian radar lost contact, military systems continued tracking an unidentified aircraft for several minutes. That aircraft matched the speed, altitude, and flight profile of MH370. The data showed something unexpected. After losing contact, the plane made a deliberate turn to the west. Not a gradual drift. Not a technical failure. A controlled maneuver. It crossed back over Malaysia, passed near Penang Island, the hometown of the captain, and then flew out over the Andaman Sea. Who was controlling the aircraft? And why was it heading in the opposite direction? Then came another revelation. Despite being invisible to radar, MH370 was still communicating. Not with air traffic control, but with a satellite. Every hour, the aircraft sent a brief automated signal known as a handshake to an Inmarsat satellite orbiting above the Indian Ocean. These signals didn't reveal location. But they proved one thing beyond doubt. The plane was still in the air. For hours. By analyzing the timing and frequency shifts of these satellite pings, engineers reconstructed 2 possible flight paths. One north, towards Central Asia. The other south, deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean. The northern route was quickly ruled out. Radar coverage and airspace monitoring made it unlikely. That left the southern corridor. A vast, empty expanse of ocean. One of the most isolated places on Earth. If MH370 had gone down there, it would explain why no wreckage had been found. But it raised a far darker question. Why fly until fuel exhaustion? And why choose a place where discovery would be nearly impossible? With every new data point, the mystery deepened. And the search was only beginning. What followed was the largest and most expensive search operation in aviation history. Ships, aircraft, and satellites from more than 20 countries were deployed across the Indian Ocean. An area larger than many nations was scanned, thousands of square kilometers of open water. And yet, day after day, nothing conclusive was found. Then, just as hope began to fade, debris started appearing. In July 2015, a wing component washed ashore on Réunion Island, nearly 4,000 kilometers from the suspected crash zone. Experts identified it as a flaperon from a Boeing 777. Later, more fragments were found along the coasts of Africa and the Indian Ocean islands. Officials claimed the pieces were from MH370. But critics raised immediate concerns. None of the debris showed clear crash markings. There were no serial numbers linking them definitively to the missing aircraft. And crucially, no main wreckage field was ever located. For many families, the discoveries brought more confusion than closure. If the plane had broken apart violently, where was the rest of it? Why were only small pieces found? And how did they travel such vast distances without more debris appearing sooner? Meanwhile, the underwater search continued. Advanced sonar mapped the ocean floor in extreme detail. Mountain ranges, deep trenches, and volcanic formations were revealed, but no aircraft. By 2017, after covering over 120,000 square kilometers, the official search was suspended. MH370 had consumed years of effort, billions of dollars, and still, no definitive answers. What remained were fragments of evidence, and an increasing number of unanswered questions. For some, the official explanation was no longer enough. And that's when alternative theories began to take hold. As official explanations stalled, alternative theories quickly filled the silence. One of the most discussed was pilot involvement. Investigators examined the flight simulator found in the captain's home. Data revealed simulated routes that extended into the southern Indian Ocean. Authorities argued this could indicate premeditation. But aviation experts pushed back. Flight simulators often contain random or incomplete data, and no clear motive was ever established. Another theory suggested mechanical failure. A catastrophic onboard fire could have disabled communication systems. Smoke or hypoxia might have incapacitated everyone on board, leaving the aircraft to fly on autopilot until fuel exhaustion. This scenario fits some of the evidence, but it failed to explain the precise turns detected by military radar. Those maneuvers appeared intentional, not automated. Then there were the more controversial claims. Some suggested the aircraft was hijacked and diverted. Others claimed advanced military technology interfered with the plane. A few even proposed that MH370 never crashed at all. While many of these ideas lacked evidence, they spread rapidly. The absence of wreckage created space for speculation, and the lack of transparency from authorities only fueled distrust. Families of the victims demanded clearer answers. Why was key data classified? Why were search areas repeatedly changed? And why did officials seem so confident without definitive proof? What troubled many investigators wasn't a single theory, but the gaps between them. Critical minutes of data were missing. Timelines didn't always align, and some records were never released to the public. Instead of clarity, the case produced more doubt, and the truth seemed to drift further away with every explanation offered. By this point, MH370 was no longer just a missing plane. It had become a symbol of uncertainty. In the years following the disappearance, MH370 permanently changed aviation. New satellite tracking systems were introduced. Aircraft communication protocols were reviewed, and airlines around the world acknowledged a truth once thought impossible. A modern passenger jet could still vanish without a trace. For the families, however, progress came with a cost. Without a confirmed crash site, there was no closure. No final answers. Only fragments of evidence scattered across oceans and timelines. Some relatives accepted the most likely conclusion, that the aircraft ended its flight in the southern Indian Ocean. Others continued to search, driven by unanswered questions and inconsistencies that never fully disappeared. Even today, new claims surface. Independent researchers reanalyze satellite data. Private search teams propose new locations. And documents long kept classified remain sealed. Each development briefly reignites hope. And each time, that hope fades again. Perhaps the most unsettling part of the MH370 story is not what we know, but what we don't. We know the plane flew for hours. We know it changed course deliberately. We know it reached a point where fuel could no longer sustain flight. But we don't know why. We don't know who made the final decisions. And we don't know what truly happened in the last moments on board. Until the main wreckage is found, MH370 remains suspended between fact and mystery. A reminder that even in an age of satellites and surveillance, some stories resist resolution. And somewhere beneath the vast Indian Ocean, the answers may still be waiting.